Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. My name is Andrew Townsend. I'm marketing operations here at Smarty. Today's webinar is about how to set up address validation using the Go SDK. Our address tools are available in lots of different SDKs, and today we decided to talk about the Go one. We're very excited to get started and hopefully teach you what you're hoping to learn today. But before I introduce our presenter, let's go over a couple housekeeping items. One, this webinar will be recorded. We will send a copy of it out to everyone that registered. So you'll be able to see this in your email. If you have to step out early, you'll be able to view that there. That doesn't mean you should step out early, but it means you can. Also, you'll be able to forward this on to anybody that you think would benefit from the material that we talk about today. So again, be looking for that in your email inbox later today. Second, to interact with our presenter and make sure that you're getting the most out of this, you can use the chat or the Q&A modules inside of the Zoom webinar interface. This will allow you to bring up your questions, and we'll be interrupting the presentation with any of the questions that you have so that you have a positive experience. All right, so our presenter today, we have Ryan Cox, one of our fantastic software developers on our backend API team with us today. We're super excited to hear what he's got to share. So without further ado, Ryan Cox.
Thank you, Andrew. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. This is going to be pretty basic. So from the very beginning, we're just going to talk about exactly what you would need to do to get the Go SDK up and running. And let's start with that. Let me go ahead and get this image out of the way. The first thing that we have to do in order to use the Go SDK is we have to have some API credentials. So if you go to our website, which is not smartystreets.me, this is our internal dev website. If you go to smarty.com and you log in, let me go ahead and hit this. So this website looks exactly the same as smarty.com. It's just our internal dev website. But if you go here, and I'm going to go ahead and log out, and you log in, it's going to let me log in. You'll have to create an account to do that, but to create an account is free. After you log in, you want to go to this API keys section. And in here, you can generate an auth ID and an auth token, or an embedded key. You can create a new embedded key. We're not going to go over how to use embedded keys today. Instead, we're going to do the secret key. Secret keys are what we use on the server side. Embedded keys we tend to use on a web client or something that is distributed to a customer. That's something that you would ship with your product. The secret keys need to be kept in-house. They need to be used on a server. And we're going to go ahead and show how to use these today. So the first thing that you'll need is an auth ID and an auth token. Again, these are found in the API keys area of your Smarty dashboard after you log in. Once we have those, what we're going to do is we're going to go to the command line, and we are going to export and we'll paste that key in there. So we're going to set these up as environment variables. I'm using Bash. I'm on a Mac, but it would be the same on Linux. Windows command line, kind of the same thing. You can't use the export command. You can look up how to do that on Windows if you're on Windows. But the key is we want to set these credentials as an environment variable. So we don't end up hard coding our credentials in our code. That's bad because sometimes we'll push our code out to a public repo, and then we've spread our credentials all over the place and they can be stolen and someone can use them. That's not a good idea. So it's best to put these as an environment variable that you use locally. I've already done this, so I'm not going to run that export command. Okay, so I have my auth ID and my auth token set up, let's say, and they're in my environment. Now, the next thing to do is create a Go module so that we can start to use the Smarty SDK. Actually, before we do that, let's go ahead and clone the GitHub repo. So our Smarty Go SDK is out in GitHub under Smarty Streets. So if we say git clone, let's go ahead and run that. I messed something up. Let's see. I'm going to grab it from over here so I don't have to hard code it.
It's all about those shortcuts.
It is. You can always grab it from here, though, thankfully. Why is this not working? Luckily, I already have it cloned. So we'll take a look at this. If you run the git clone command and it works, you'll end up with our Smarty SDK downloaded locally. This is what the source code looks like when it's local.
I can verify that code gets stage fright.
It does, yes. I'm going to go ahead and make sure I'm up to date with what I've got checked out locally. So I did a git pull. The next thing to look at is the version. So if you cat out version.go inside the SDK, this is going to tell you which version of the SDK you currently have. We also have a changelog project out under Smarty Streets. You can always come out here and look at the changelog, go to SDK, and whichever one you're using, in this case, the Go SDK. If you look here, this will show you the latest version that we have published. And it'll also tell you what's changed, any bug fixes that might be in there, that kind of thing. So in that way, you can always verify that you've got the latest SDK. Okay, so we've got the SDK. Let's start using it. So I'm in this project. Whoops. Is that why my git clone command didn't work? That's why my git clone command didn't work. It didn't like that I was already in a project. So this time it worked. Now you can see that I'm there. Anyway, let's go back. We're going to make a project and we're going to call it US Street. So I made a directory, US Street client. Now inside of here, I'm going to say go mod init. And I need a name for my module. So we're going to call it example for now. So I just created a module called example inside of our US Street client. And now I'm going to add our SDK to it. So I'm going to say go get github.com, Smarty Streets. Get does not work. Go get will though. There we go. And now if I cat out my go.mod file, we're going to see that right here, we've added the Smarty Streets Go SDK. It's added a little comment there saying indirect because no code is currently using that. Let's go ahead and add some code that's going to use that. I'm going to use the Helix editor, which is, it's a VI clone kind of built in Rust. It just has some nice code extensions that I like. So we're going to use the Helix editor. And we're going to create a file called usstreet.go. And we're going to start to add some code to this. So we need a main package. Whoops. And then we need a main function. So we have something that actually will run in Go. And let's go ahead and just do hello world first so we can see this actually run. Or we'll do a hello from Smarty. Street client will do a go run usstreet.go. And I've already got some nice syntax errors. I forgot something. I did my brackets wrong. So let's fix that. And rerun this. Yay, hello from Smarty. Okay, so now let's get started using the client. So we know our Go code runs. We've got Go set up properly on our machine. We can start using our client. So the first step is to actually build our client. So let's create a variable and we're going to call it client. And we're going to use a package called WireUp. Let's go add that to our import statement so we can actually start to get some code completion on it too. That's from GitHub. So we're going to create a new secret key credential that will pass to the usstreet API client. And this is that part where I'm going to say os.getEnv, which is going to grab an environment variable from the operating system. So that's where we have set up our keys. They're actually out in the environment instead of in our code, which is just good practice. The last piece of information that we need here is a license. So we're going to pass in a license string. And in order to find that, you go back to your Smarty account. So I'm over here on my Smarty account, click on the subscriptions tab, and we're using US Street, which just happens to correspond to this US address verification core edition. And you can just click on the license value. It'll copy it to the clipboard for you. And you can go back and paste that in place. US Core Cloud. Okay. So we've got our client all set up here. we're using our keys, our credentials properly, and we have a proper license. Now let's go ahead and create a lookup that we can use with this client. So we're going to create a lookup. And we'll give it an input ID. This value, all of these values that I'm going to set up with the lookup, if you go to our documentation out on our website, let me show you how to navigate to that really quickly. Under resources, there's a cloud API reference. If you click on that, you can see all of our APIs have a reference. This is the core REST reference, but it works really well for the SDKs too, so you can kind of see what exactly is getting called. So if we go here to the US Street API, which is the one we're using, and then we scroll down, we're going to see here are the input fields. Our lookup corresponds to these input fields. So right now I'm defining an input ID, and we're going to do quite a few of these, but this is where you find out what's available. So let's go back over here. We have an input ID, and for that, we're going to put in my first Smarty lookup. This input ID, it doesn't matter what it is. That's defined by you. It gets sent to Smarty, and then we fill in the lookup with the address that you tried to look up and pass you that ID back. So it's a way for you to kind of track which lookup corresponded to which result. That's what that field is for. Addressee is just a name, so we can say Smarty Webinar. This is one of those other things that just gets returned to us. Oops. So we have an addressee. Now here's the meat. Here's the street that we want to look up. This is important. We're going to go with 1 Zion Park Boulevard. Street 2. Nature. Secondary. City is Springdale. State is Utah. Zip code is 84767. Max candidates. This value tells Smarty, the Smarty API, how many possibilities we want to return. So in case our address is somewhat ambiguous, this is the max number of results that we'll get back in each response. And the last piece is the match strategy. And this is kind of important. We have 3 separate values you can use for this. We have invalid, we have strict, and then we have a match enhanced. Match enhanced performs some extra smart lookups that's kind of Smarty proprietary, tries to parse the address in a smarter way. We're going to go ahead and use street dot invalid at first. Invalid, you're guaranteed to at least get some result. Whether or not it's a valid postal address or not, we'll find out. But for right now, we're going to use street.invalid as our strategy on this one. Okay, now that we have a lookup, we have to create a batch to send the lookup. We're going to append our lookup in there. little error handling here. So the append command will return a true or false if the lookup was actually appended. So we're just checking to make sure it actually got appended. And then if it did, we're going to send it. Here, whoops, I have to actually do this the right way. There we go. The send batch with context will return an error if the send did not work. So we'll check for that and log it if there was a problem. Otherwise, we'll start to process what we get back. So input.results is where the results are actually at, but we still range over that batch of records that we sent. That's where sometimes that input ID can come in really handy. And I'm going to go ahead and use JSON to make the output that we're getting nice. All right, so if I've typed the code all well, this will just work. The chances of that are probably kind of slim though, but let's go give it a try. First thing I'll do is run go format. And it's going to tell me I'm missing a comma before new line in composite literal on line 21. Let's take a look. What am I doing here? Oh, I forgot to add a trailing comma. So let's add that. And we're not go formatting it. Hey, it looks good. Now let's see if it actually works. We'll say go run usstreet.go. And all sorts of things aren't working because I didn't import them. So we'll go back up to our import statement and we'll add all these missing imports that we need. Got format, we're going to need log, we're going to need OS. And we're going to need encoding /JSON. We're going to need one more bit from our Smarty SDK as well. Let's put that in. Oops. This is the part for the US Street API. There we go. We'll write that out and let's see if it'll run this time. Did I mess something up? Oh, yes, it didn't write because go format changed its format. There we go. Come back over here and we'll run it. Saying unknown field max candidates, which probably means that I misspelled something. Candidates. That looks good, right? Find street dot invalid. Let's see if, well, we'll go with strict then this time because I misspelled that. Just so we can get this to run really quick, let's give it a try. Oh, it should say match before that. That's why I messed up. Let's go fix that. So we'll go with match invalid. Hey. And it still is going to have one more problem with Marshall indent. So let's see what I did wrong there. Let me look at my error message one more time, saying that that is undefined. Got encoding JSON. So there's a good chance that I mistyped something. Let's take a look. Doesn't have two L's. Hey, look at that. We actually got some results back. So this sent our lookup off to Smarty. And this tells us right here what the candidate was. So this is what we sent and what we got back. We got back 2 results, it looks like. Oh, wait, did we? No, we only got back 1. Let's see if we can change this a little bit and get back 2 results. So if we come up here and we say match strict, see if that makes any difference in the results we get back. And we still only got 1 result back. I ran this morning and I was getting 2 results. So obviously I'm doing something different, but that's okay. Let's also look at match enhanced, which is Smarty's proprietary engine, which gives us, it does some extra stuff to give us better results. We did get back 2 candidates now. So using the enhanced match, we get back a candidate that has this AACCR7 and a candidate that has AACC. We can look through these and see which one is better, but let's talk a little bit about these DPV footnotes. So the result we get back, if you go back to Smarty's documentation, this is US Street API documentation. Down here at the bottom, we have a listing of some of the possible match code, the DPV match codes that come back. AA means that street name, city, state, and zip are all valid. And what were the others on that first one? CC means the submitted secondary information was not recognized, of course, because we put an apartment 2 in there for a secondary, and it's a PO box. There's no apartment. So CC tells us it threw that away. And then the R7 is telling us that it's confirmed as a valid address that doesn't currently receive US Postal Service street delivery. So no street delivery again, because it's a post office box. There are also some other indicators. Let's look at those. So we've got our DPV footnotes, but then we also have this footnotes section. We can see we have an E sharp, an I sharp, and an L sharp. Down here at the bottom of the documentation, it talks about what those mean. E sharp is multiple records were returned with the same 5-digit zip code. Let's see, we had an L sharp, an I sharp, and an L sharp. So an I sharp is insufficient and correct address data. more than one zip plus 4 code, and an L-sharp address component was added, changed, or deleted in order to achieve the match. So we did something a little bit with it on Smarty's side before we sent it to AMS, which is the Postal Service's product. Those are some of the things to look at for this as we work with it. One last thing I want to show. So the importance. Do you have any questions, Andrew, at all?
No questions at this time, or everybody's busy doing it themselves as they're following along. They're just getting it done.
Okay. Let me talk about really quickly. So these batches are meant to be loaded up, not just to put one lookup in. So let's modify the code just a little bit. And we'll change this batch append, put it in a for loop. This is kind of contrived. Usually what you would do is you would fill in the lookups with different addresses. But in this case, we're going to go ahead and just add 100 of these to the batch. You're going to go format on that. One of the nice things about this go format command is it will fix indentations and other things, usually. Yeah, it did fix it. My auto reload isn't working for some reason, but you can see that the for loop is now all nice and indented. I didn't have to do all the work for that because I'm kind of lazy. Now, if we run this, we can see that it ran through all 100 of those lookups. Even though it's the exact same address, we still get back each candidate. It tells us what the results were, those kinds of things. Those batches are meant to be loaded up with 100 items. If we put more than that in there, let's see what happens. So if let's say we add 105 and try to run this, you can see that we ran into an error. So it won't allow us to append more than what Smarty accepts. If we try to put 105 in that batch, it returns a false, and we wrote the code that checks for that right here. See if added. So that's important. So this is just a brief introduction to all the power in the SDK. Let's go back to the SDK. So this is where I checked the SDK out to. I cloned it to. Let's go ahead and run the test. So if we say go test and run, we have a bunch of tests that you can run to make sure that everything's working locally for you. You can see that all of our tests passed. We also have this wonderful examples directory. There is an example for each of our APIs, and the examples are pretty well written. If you go in, let's go look at our US Street example. In here, there are small little hints for some of the different options that you can send when you're building the US Street API client. You can turn on debug HTTP output, so you can see the actual HTTP requests and responses in detail, what's being sent to and received from Smarty. You can set up your own client with different timeouts if you want. There's also built into this SDK an automatic retry client, which is very important. All of our APIs are rate limited, and the retry client takes that into account. So it won't error out. It will automatically back off and wait and reissue the requests. That's one of the most important reasons that we recommend using the SDK, is all of that is built in. But for any of the SDK endpoints, US Street here, you can see there's a nice example. You can run the example. All you'd need to do is set up your OS environment variables, and it'll just run. So that's a brief introduction to our SDK.
That's excellent. Thank you, Ryan. Any last call for questions for anybody that has questions about how Ryan did that? We will, like I said, we'll get this up and available on our website, as well as we'll send it out to an email so you can follow it along. As Ryan also mentioned at the beginning, if you do not already have an account, but you want to try this, see how it works, you can get a free account, and that account does come with a decent number of free lookups depending on which plan you dive into. You'll get 1,000 free lookups if you try the US Street API. So you can set that up for free, just like he said, at smarty.com. And as you can see there up on the screen, there's a little sign up free button you can click, and you can get going within a few seconds. Thanks, Ryan, for all of this information. Thanks, everybody, for joining us today. And we hope this has been very useful for you. And we'll see you guys in our next webinar. See ya.